You hear the silk before you see it, whisper soft, sliding across marble floors and corridors where even breathing feels like rebellion. The scent reaches you next, jasmine oil mixed with something sharper, something like fear. Then you see her, barely 17, being led through a doorway that hundreds have entered but few have survived with their hearts intact. She doesn't know yet that the bed she's walking toward isn't a place of intimacy. It's a courtroom where her body is evidence, her desire is irrelevant, and every sigh will be written down by a man with ink-stained fingers in a room she'll never see. Before we dive deeper into this world, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? It fascinates me endlessly that a story buried in 16th century Ottoman archives can find you, wherever you are right now, centuries later. This is the Topkapı Palace Harem in Istanbul, during the reign of Suleyman the Magnificent, though there was nothing magnificent about what happened behind these particular walls. Between 1520 and 1566, the Ottoman Empire stretched from Budapest to Baghdad, from the gates of Vienna to the shores of the Persian Gulf. But the real power, the invisible engine that determined which princes lived, which wars were fought, which alliances held, operated in a series of locked chambers where approximately 300 women lived under laws so precise, so psychologically devastating, that foreign ambassadors who learned of them refused to believe they were real. Venetian envoys called them impossible cruelties. French diplomats described them as a science of control we cannot comprehend. But Ottoman palace registers, the detailed bureaucratic records that survived fires, revolutions, and centuries of secrecy, prove every word was true. These weren't customs. They were laws, enforced with surgical precision, designed to transform human intimacy into an instrument of imperial power. And the first of these laws was so fundamentally cruel that it made love itself a crime punishable by death. No woman, regardless of beauty, regardless of the Sultan's affection, regardless of how desperately he might want her to stay, was permitted to remain in his bed after he fell asleep. The moment his breathing deepened into slumber, she was required to rise in total silence, gather the ceremonial silk garments she'd worn, garments she would never wear again, and return to her own quarters before the first call to prayer echoed over the Bosphorus. This wasn't a suggestion whispered by jealous rivals. It was law, enforced by eunuch guards who stood outside the imperial chamber throughout the night, tracking time with the precision of executioners. If dawnlight touched a woman still in the Sultan's bed, the punishment wasn't exile or disgrace. It was death, carried out quietly, efficiently, her body weighted with stones and dropped into the sea from a palace dock designed specifically for this purpose. The logic was coldly brilliant. By preventing any woman from sharing the vulnerable, unguarded hours of sleep, the system ensured no single concubine could whisper into the Sultan's ear during those moments when men's defenses are lowest, when pillow talk can reshape empires. More devastatingly, it made genuine intimacy impossible. You cannot truly love someone you're required to abandon the moment they close their eyes. For decades, this law held absolutely. Then, in 1520, a young Ukrainian woman named Alexandra Lisovska, later known as Hürrem Sultan, did the unthinkable. After an encounter with Suleiman, she didn't leave. She stayed through the night, her head resting on the pillow beside his until morning light flooded the room. When the guards discovered her at dawn, the palace exploded into chaos. Senior concubines who had spent years, sometimes decades, obeying this brutal rule with perfect submission demanded her immediate execution. The Valid Sultan, Suleiman's mother and the ultimate authority over the harem, saw her own power directly challenged by a girl barely 20 years old. Palace chroniclers recorded the upheaval. The order of the House of Osman has been violated. The foundations tremble. But Hürrem wasn't executed. Suleiman, for reasons that still divide historians, protected her. That single act of defiance, that one morning she survived, became the crack in a system that had seemed unbreakable. She would eventually become his legal wife, the first concubine in Ottoman history to achieve that status, and wield power that shaped the empire for decades. But her story is the exception so rare it proves how absolute the rule was for everyone else. Because even if a woman navigated that first law, even if she survived the brutality of scheduled intimacy and forbidden overnight stays, the second law waited to destroy her in a completely different way. It was called one concubine, one son, and its elegance was its cruelty. The moment a woman gave birth to a male heir, she could never share the Sultan's bed again. Not ever. Not for any reason. Her intimate life ended the instant she fulfilled her ultimate purpose. Imagine the psychological trap. Giving birth to a son was the highest achievement possible. It elevated a concubine from anonymity to genuine power. She was immediately moved to lavish private apartments, assigned her own servants, granted immense wealth, and became the mother of a potential sultan, one of the most influential positions in the empire. But that promotion was also a life sentence of physical isolation. The very act that won her power also severed her from the intimacy that had brought her there. The archives describe women weeping in their new, beautiful chambers, surrounded by luxury they could never enjoy, staring at walls that felt like prison stone despite being covered in silk. Their bodies had become too valuable to risk another pregnancy that might complicate succession, so they were discarded, kept alive and comfortable, but fundamentally alone. Women who bore only daughters faced a different horror. They remained in the rotation, still eligible for the Sultan's attention, but they lived under the crushing anxiety that their next pregnancy might be a son, ending their intimate lives forever. This desperation drove some to dangerous measures. Consuming herbs meant to delay conception, bribing palace physicians for potions that might influence the sex of a child, even attempting crude forms of birth control that often resulted in illness or death. Their bodies became battlegrounds between desire and duty, between the hunger for connection and the terror of its permanent loss. But to even enter this deadly lottery, to have any chance at intimacy's brief, monitored moments, a woman first had to pass through examinations so invasive and arbitrary they seemed designed less to select the worthy and more to remind everyone that their bodies didn't belong to them. Palace midwives conducted what official records euphemistically called purity assessments, but these went far beyond simple virginity tests. Women were evaluated on measurements that had nothing to do with health or compatibility. The exact proportions of their hips, the scent their skin produced naturally, whether their breathing patterns during sleep might disturb the Sultan, whether they might snore or talk unconsciously in the night. Imagine the paralyzing fear of knowing that a sound you made while completely unconscious could end your future in the palace, could send you back to obscurity or worse. Those who failed these bizarre, pseudo-scientific criteria were dismissed from bedroom service immediately, their value to the empire erased by the width of a hip bone or the sound of a breath. The examinations reached their most grotesque extreme during the reign of Sultan Ibrahim III in the 1640s. Ibrahim, whose mental instability is well documented in both Ottoman and European sources, became obsessed with the anatomy of a cow he'd seen during a hunting expedition. He ordered goldsmiths to create exact replicas of the animal's hindquarters and dispatched them to every province of the empire with a single, bewildering command: find women whose bodies matched the golden models. Governors mobilized entire administrative networks for this search, turning the apparatus of state into an instrument of one man's fixation. Eventually, a 330-pound Armenian woman was located, renamed Shivakar, and brought to Istanbul, where Ibrahim celebrated her as though she were a military conquest. His obsessions didn't end there. Convinced that animal pelts enhanced his performance, he had his chambers stripped of priceless Persian carpets and silk tapestries, replacing them with wolf skins and bear hides, transforming the Sultan's bedroom into something between a throne room and a hunter's den. But Ibrahim's madness was just a temporary storm within a system that operated with mechanical precision, regardless of who sat on the throne. Because beyond any individual sultan's eccentricities, the harem functioned as a bureaucratic machine where even desire was reduced to paperwork. The palace treasurer maintained detailed diaries of every intimate encounter, the date, the woman's name, the outcome. In a quiet office, a scribe would dip his quill and transform what was supposed to be passion into a ledger entry, creating an undeniable paper trail designed to prevent succession disputes. In this world, even love was filed in triplicate. The consequences for circumventing this system were absolute. One of Suleiman's own wives, Gulfem Hatun, was executed for selling her scheduled night to another concubine. This wasn't just forbidden trading, it was a direct challenge to the state's ownership of these women's bodies, and the punishment sent a message to everyone. You do not own your time, your body, or your desire. The empire owns all of it. Yet the fact that women risked death to buy and sell these encounters reveals how desperately valuable they were. An underground economy thrived in shadows. Women trading jewelry, secrets, and favors to bribe servants or manipulate the rotation schedule, creating a hidden marketplace where intimacy itself became currency. But the written records were only the visible layer of control. The real genius of the system lay in the architecture itself. The Sultan's quarters weren't designed for romance. They were built for surveillance. Hidden passageways called secret roads allowed eunuchs to move silently through the walls, their presence unfelt, ensuring nothing escaped oversight. Windows were angled not just for light, but for observation. The famous Iznik tiles that covered the walls in shimmering geometric patterns weren't merely decorative. Their glazed surfaces acted as distorted mirrors, catching movement from every angle. Privacy was theater, an illusion granted only when it served the empire's purposes. And presiding over this entire apparatus of observation was the Valid Sultan, the reigning sultan's mother, who managed the harem with the skill of a general commanding an army. From her chambers, she tracked menstrual cycles, monitored pregnancies, and assessed intimate availability, maintaining charts as detailed as military supply inventories. At the beginning of each month, she would announce the new rotation in a ritual as theatrical as it was cruel. Concubines gathered in tense silence as she revealed their fates through the language of silk handkerchiefs. One embroidered with golden thread meant immediate access to the sultan's bed, the pinnacle of favor. A plain white cloth meant exile, possibly permanent. It was judgment rendered in fabric. Before any woman could face the terror of the sultan's chamber, she endured days of ritual preparation designed to strip away her identity and transform her into a flawless imperial offering. She was moved into isolation, cut off from the rest of the harem, where attendants began the meticulous process of erasure and reconstruction. She was bathed for hours in waters scented with rare oils from Persia and Arabia, her skin massaged until it glowed, her hair arranged in elaborate styles that took servants half a day to complete. This wasn't luxury. It was purification, an almost spiritual cleansing meant to remove any trace of her former self. She was dressed in garments of the finest silk, designed for a single use. These clothes would never be worn again after the encounter. They were either destroyed or locked away as relics, physical proof that the transaction had occurred. The walk to the Sultan's chamber was a performance of submission. The chosen woman was escorted by eunuchs through the Altın Yol, the Golden Road, secret, winding passages that ensured no other concubine could witness her journey. Imagine that walk, the only sounds your own footsteps and the breathing of guards, each turn taking you further from anything familiar, deeper into silence so complete it felt like drowning. When she finally arrived, a final set of instructions would be whispered. Enter the chamber, crawl to the foot of the bed, wait silently. She could never turn her back on the Sultan. The risk of a concealed weapon was always assumed. She was forbidden to speak unless spoken to, forbidden to express pleasure or pain too obviously, forbidden even to sigh too loudly. She was an offering, perfected and terrified. How could anyone endure this? The answer lay in 2 years of relentless training that began the moment a woman entered the harem. New arrivals were taught poetry, music, languages, and courtly etiquette. But the most guarded curriculum was in what palace records called the intimate arts. These lessons were taught not by men but by elderly concubines, women who had survived decades in the system, their hearts long calcified into stone. They instructed younger women in techniques of performance, how to read the Sultan's mood from the smallest facial twitch, how to mirror his desires without seeming too eager, how to feign devotion while keeping their true selves locked away where no one could reach. By the end of their training, these women could perform emotions on command. Love, passion, indifference, each an act perfected to ensure survival. The final examination was chilling. Candidates demonstrated their skills before a panel of senior harem officials in simulated encounters, their every movement judged as though intimacy were nothing more than theater. The cruelty continued after every real encounter. The woman was immediately escorted out and subjected to medical examination. Within hours, her body was inspected for signs of pregnancy, her worth measured not by her experience but by whether she might produce an heir. The entire system was designed to eliminate the possibility of genuine feeling. To show real affection for the Sultan was dangerous, a sign of personal attachment that might threaten absolute loyalty to the state. Women who displayed authentic emotion were quietly removed from rotation, sometimes sent away, sometimes worse. In this world of enforced performance, sincerity itself became a crime. But in a system this rigid, where access to the Sultan was the only source of power, an underground economy inevitably emerged. The harem became a web of surveillance where senior concubines reported on younger ones, where new arrivals were encouraged to expose rivals' mistakes. Every smile, every whisper, every glance could be twisted into evidence of betrayal. Within this culture of fear, desperate bargains were struck. Women sold precious jewelry to bribe eunuchs or influence the Valid Sultan. Others used their scheduled nights as currency in complex political games, trading access for protection of their families or advancement of their allies. Beauty became another battlefield. Women smeared their faces with lead-based powders to achieve luminous pale skin, ignoring the fact that the toxins slowly poisoned their flesh. They rubbed mercury into their cheeks for a permanent blush, sacrificing long-term health for fleeting advantage in the hierarchy of desire. Fainting during encounters was common, the result of these toxic beauty rituals and the starvation diets used to maintain impossibly delicate figures. Even their food was controlled. Palace physicians designed meal plans that shifted with political needs, foods to encourage fertility when heirs were wanted, herbs to prevent it when they weren't. Every bite they ate was dictated by the empire's requirements. The system imprisoned everyone. The eunuchs who guarded these women were themselves captives, their loyalty guaranteed by their own mutilation, their humanity sacrificed to serve the throne. Even the Sultan became a prisoner of the machine designed to protect his power. The relentless system of control prevented him from forming genuine attachments, transforming him from a husband or lover into a mere symbol of imperial desire, his own heart isolated by the very machinery meant to serve him. History records rare exceptions, moments when someone slipped through the cracks. Hürrem Sultan's story is the most famous, her defiance marking not just survival but ascendancy, proving even the most rigid system could be bent by a will strong enough. But her triumph was the exception that illuminates the rule. For every woman who successfully navigated these treacherous currents, thousands were silently consumed, their stories ending not in power but in obscurity, exile, or quiet death. The archives remain a testament. Pages of schedules, rules, punishments, ceremonies, each one whispering the same truth. The Ottoman harem was never about desire. It was about domination. A machine designed to control not only women's bodies but men's hearts, ensuring love never interfered with the empire's iron will. When you walk through Topkapi Palace today, the tiles still glisten, the corridors still echo, but if you stand very still in the harem's empty chambers, you might hear something beneath the silence. Not ghosts exactly, but the residue of lives lived under laws that turned intimacy into spectacle and affection into treason. They were taught to perform love while forbidden to feel it, to celebrate pregnancy while knowing it would end their intimate lives, to perfect their beauty with poisons that destroyed them, to trade their humanity for a chance at power in a system designed to ensure they could never truly possess either. The marble remembers what the empire tried to forget, that behind every law, every silk handkerchief, every entry in a treasurer's ledger, there was a human being whose heart still beat, whose desires still burned, whose humanity persisted even when the world insisted she was nothing more than a body to be scheduled, inspected, and filed away.